Hi everyone, I'm Tim Tom. I'm the Peat Programme Manager for Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the Yorkshire Peat Partnership. In this session, we're going to focus on how we transfer our knowledge and expertise onto new generations of peaty people. We've got three presentations. The first from Richard Lindsay at the University of East London, looking at resources and training in the world of education, followed by Ollie Mackrill from Yorkshire Peat Partnership, who is going to talk about a new Lantra approved course for new project officers, followed by Emily Taylor from the Crichton Centre covering training for contractors. There'll be the usual Q&A at the end of the presentations. Please feel free to use the chat, but for the questions, please submit them via the Q&A button. Okay, let's get started with Richard.
Thanks for joining me on my presentation today. I'm the Peatland Restoration Team Leader for the Yorkshire Peat Partnership, and in collaboration with the Welsh Peatland Sustainable Management Scheme, we've developed this Peatland Restoration Practitioner Training course, which is accredited by Lantra. So I'm just going to briefly go through how we developed the course, our aspirations and the costs. So why was it developed? up until the point that we did this, there was no accredited training programme. And it was through a contract with the Welsh Peatland Sustainable Management Scheme. So we developed this training programme in peatland restoration as part of that contract. Now, there's a pressing need, really. There's, as stated in the UK peatland strategy in the sentence below there, the ambition is to get 2 million hectares in good condition or under restoration agreement and sustainably managed by 2040, an ambitious goal. And that matches up with the Sustainable Management Scheme's ambition in their project, where they included the aspiration to get 40 different sites into sustainable management by 2030. So there's a need for peatland restoration officers in Wales and for them to hit the ground running, really, which is why we've developed this course. They included, in their project, they included this, the development of an accredited training programme, and it was aimed at accrediting 15 new peatland restoration officers. These will be new recruits and land managers with no peatland experience. How did we go about developing it? We did it through a consultation group at the Welsh Peatland Action. Their specialisms are in fens, raised bog and blanket bogs. And then also our restoration team expertise lies in blanket bogs, having worked there for 10 years. We also were lucky at YPP, we've got Dr. Chris Miller on our team. He's working on the Pennine Peat Life project, and he's currently working in the Forest of Bowland and Yorkshire, restoring heavily degraded blanket bog. But he has 10 years of experience prior to joining our team, and that was in raised bogs, restoring and managing those sites in Lancashire. So when we developed the course, we looked at our peatland restoration assistant skill set and also the officer level skill set. We looked at basically the skills that are needed to deliver those roles, and we looked at knowledge, skills and behaviours. So we broke down the role description for the assistants, and that acted as a way for us to assess anybody who was putting themselves forward to take the course, whether they had enough experience prior to attending, so that they could just dive straight in. The officer skill set that we ran, that formulated the course content. So when we did a brainstorming session or thought bubble work with the restoration team, we came up with lots and lots of different skills, knowledge and behaviours that needed to go into the course. And I started to group them together. I split them up into 2 key phases, the preparation phase of restoration and the delivery phase of restoration. So I formulated 8 different units, 4 into the preparation phase and then 4 into the delivery phase. This is the course content. So peatland ecology will cover things like form and function, risks, how to sustainably manage peatlands. Health and safety touches on risk assessments, site assessments, site risk assessment, sorry, and CDM as well. So what role does the practitioner play? Are they just the principal designer, or are they also the principal contractor? Surveying will touch on aerial photographs, collecting vegetation data, looking at topography, aspect, hydrology, nitrogen levels. Restoration interventions is specifically at what to use and where. Delivery, we're looking at actually developing a plan. So the delivery phase comes after, it's post-survey, and this would be around recommendations, interpreting data, analysing the data for one, and then delivering restoration is at the sort of supervision and management of the capital works. Evaluating success would be around monitoring. Advocacy would be advocating recommendations in restoration plan meetings. And then funding and potential funding would be around the Peatland Code and tendering for contracts. So the challenge with this is how to teach, evaluate and accredit so much knowledge and skill into an affordable course. We do it through these 8 different steps here. So it would be tiered and reinforced, continually assessed. We've put in an extensive reading list because I see this course as very similar to driving. Learning to drive, really. You pass your driving test and then you only learn to drive once you're in the car on your own. So by having an extensive reading list behind this, they would have the resources to take home and find the answers to the questions. We'd include things like conserving bog handbook. So yeah, it'd be simply taught, peer-to-peer development, lots of group activities, 2 field trip days, to a fen, a raised bog and a blanket bog. And then the final task would be in a portfolio, so that would be evaluated, and then that would be a take-home resource. Due to this, the structure of it and the way that it's been put together, it wouldn't be possible to do it online. So yeah, we basically reached the point with Wales where we developed the course, we accredited the course. It was due to run on the 31st of March, and then COVID came, so that's where we're up to. So when and where, that's the next step. As mentioned, with the 2 field trip days, we would need to organise the sites. I feel that the past IUCN conference field trips, they're ideal locations, and also there's a need for a training centre and then accommodation costs. So ideally we would deliver this in each of the home nations depending on demand, really. So I'd love to hear your feedback on this, and hopefully, you know, fire some questions at me in the question and answer session after these talks. Brass tacks down, how much? So non-variable costs. You can see there that this includes the course for 15 learners. So that would cover everything that's in the list there. Trainer costs, organising the food trips, setting it up, materials, certification, evaluation. And then the cost, which is why I couldn't just give you a complete figure. Transport to wherever the course was going to be run, fuel and mileage. Transport covers, there would be a need for a minibus to take everyone out to these field trips locations. Accommodation would be for the trainers, and then if it was a residential course, yeah, potentially costs for the learners, and then the training centre. As an example, though, when we did it to set it up through Wales, we used Peatland, which is a training facility run through Snowdonia National Park, so it was possible to negotiate on fees and price. But I'd love to hear whether anybody would be interested in working with us on running this course in either Scotland, Northern Ireland or Wales. So thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emily Taylor, and I'll be talking to you today about the Peatland Action training programme. Hopefully you've heard quite a bit about the Peatland Action project in Scotland, and so this afternoon I'm just going to take you through what we're doing to build capacity in the restoration community across the country. So why do we need a training programme? Well, we need to build capacity. We need to engage more contractors, new contractors to peatland restoration. We need to be raising awareness of peatland restoration and what it looks like and what it means for a landowner and a land manager. And we also need to ensure that we're always working to best practice, and that this best practice is evolving, and that we're learning and we're disseminating those learnings back again to the restoration community. So who are we targeting the training to? Well, primarily we want to engage with machine operators. We want to build capacity in our contractors. We also want to engage landowners and managers. We want to invite them along so they can understand what peatland restoration means, what it looks like, the impact it has on their ground. We also want to be targeting key players in peatland restoration and the delivery of restoration projects. So we're increasingly looking at training up ECOWs, ecological clerks of works, to do the restoration and help with project management. We're also looking to train up consultants. Increasingly, peatland restoration is quite an important body of their work now, so we've had quite a number of consultants come along in our courses. And of course, we want to be training ourselves. We want to be sharing information and knowledge between the delivery team and Peatland Action. So we do now meet to talk the technical things and talk peatland restoration between the project officers and the project, and that is very useful. So what's the kind of ethos behind our training programme? Well, this is about meeting the project needs and the needs of our contractors as well. So our 2-day courses, usually 2-day courses, are very practical. They have a sense of regionality about them, so we'll look at local sites, we'll look at local conditions and local needs when it comes to peatland restoration, the kind of techniques they might be using. I suppose it's fair to say that we're a bit less prescriptive in terms of step-by-step actions you take to deliver a peatland restoration technique. It's more about the aim that we're trying to achieve, the outcome. So we're looking for sort of a less prescriptive approach, more proactive. By that I mean a contractor is equipped with the understanding of what it is we're aiming for, so they can understand how they do it on their site, because our sites vary so much across Scotland that often you do need to be thinking on your feet in some of our projects. And ultimately we want these courses to be really practical and really useful. We're only getting people onto the course once they know it's going to be a useful, practical demonstration of peatland restoration. And I've loved some of the feedback I've had from people that have come along. So refreshingly informative and very refreshing to attend a course with a practical, common sense approach. Well, I'm very pleased. So that's what this is all about, really, engaging people with the information that they need to know. So course format, well, usually we're looking at a 2-day event with an indoor element and an outdoor element. Usually we work with the local project officer as well, so they'll help me invite people along. They know the kind of key players or people that might be interested in that area and get involved in restoration. And also they know some of the kind of local site conditions, some of the nuances to their sites as well, which can be very useful. We make space for lots and lots of discussion, open discussion, and the discussions have been brilliant. We're all learning from each other all the time, which is really good. But really the key things we're covering in these 2 days is we're talking through the restoration techniques. Some of these restoration techniques are completely new to people, so we take a bit of time going through them. Why do we do them that way? What sort of machinery might you need? Some of the practicalities around these techniques. And then we talk about, well, what are the signs of success or failure of these techniques? What's the end results we're looking for on the ground? And then we do a bit about designing and planning a project, thinking about practicalities around that. And then also we'll look at what the specific needs in an area might be. So for example, up on Shetland, there was a real interest understanding how to map projects. So we did a little session on handheld GPS units, how to use those and how to use some of the kind of online free software that's now available. And that went really well. So I think having the outdoor element to these courses is really important. We try and always have a demonstration digger on site. So we have somebody there showing us a kind of high-speed profiling technique, ditch blocking technique, and lots of questions asked around that, which does add to the complexity of the logistics of organising these events, but definitely useful to have. We're also quite opportunistic in terms of the events that we run, so we'll try and partner up with organisations that are also delivering peatland events at the time. So for example, Soil Association, the Scottish Crofting Federation. We've also worked with Forestland Scotland to deliver a forest to bog specific training event as well. We've also trained internally, as I said. A great example of this was when we had a bit of a head scratching day looking at bare peat restoration techniques, and we invited all the project officers along, but we also invited officers from other projects as well, so across the UK, so together we kind of understand what's working well in places, what's maybe kind of not working so well, and we kind of learn from each other that way. We also have just run our first virtual online training event for our new cohort of eCows that we're employing by Peatland Action to help with site visits and site reporting. So that was very specific, looking at their skills and upskilling them in some of the things we need them to be looking out for on the ground as well. So who are we getting along to these courses? Well, this is a snapshot taken at the training programme this time last year. We've actually done very few events since, obviously because of the COVID pandemic. But you'll see, yeah, about a third of the people coming along are contractors. These are actual guys that sit in machines and do the work. We're getting more and more consultants interested in coming along, but we're now looking to really prioritise contractors coming to these events. Land managers, we've had lots of land managers join us, and agency staff as well, national parks, some students as well. So a kind of a varied range of people. And actually what's proved to be very useful about these courses is that mix of delegates that are joining us, that mix of conversation, that mix of viewpoints. There's not many forums where consultants can talk directly to a contractor can talk directly to the national park. And I think we've all learned a lot that way. So often the great discussions are over coffee breaks, lunch breaks. We make a lot of time in the programme to have that conversation, those discussions, and we've had lots of positive feedback that there's this real mix of people coming along. Just wanted to touch briefly on the kind of regionality, if you like, of our training programme. You'll see the map here on the left shows you where we've done training courses to date. So we've been everywhere from Shetland all the way down to south of Scotland. It's really important for us to get into the different regions, not only because site conditions are often quite different, but we want to be raising the profile of Peatland Action Project across Scotland. But with that comes the opportunity to really tailor our events to a location, to that location's needs. So for example, here we have a picture of the demonstration day we had on Lewis, and we were looking at reprofiling old abandoned peat banks. So that's very, very important work up there. There's a lot of that to do. So we do really try and tailor our courses. Every course is tweaked and redesigned for that specific group of people. The feedback we get from people, what they want to get out of a course, so we'll kind of adjust the course as it goes along, the 2 days as well, so we're always reacting to the needs of people that come along, which is fantastic and really good for the project, a really good way of making peatland action, peatland restoration relevant to local people. But it has presented us with challenges when it comes to looking at accreditation. How do we standardise a course like this? Well, at the moment, we're not aiming to do that. We're still in the phase of very much engaging new contractors, new landowners, new land managers to peatland action. So at the moment, certainly in the short term, we'll just be looking to continue these kind of regionally kind of focused events. So that brings me on to kind of the wider benefits that we've seen with the training programme. A lot of this is anecdotal, but I do think we're not selling ourselves enough on the kind of rural skills that we're teaching, the ability for businesses to really diversify. We're looking at people gaining new skills and hopefully in the end look to kind of new jobs being created in very rural areas actually. So very, very important aspect of this is diversifying the portfolio of work a contractor company can take on, for example. Obviously, this will make peatland action more sustainable in the long term. We need to build contractor capacity desperately so we can actually roll out the huge programme of work that we need to do to meet our targets. What I've also found myself is I'm learning an awful lot. Every course I do, I learn from machine operators, I learn from the people that come on these courses. And it's made me think that there are local approaches to restoration that needs to be considered, and often it's these people that have been working out on these hills, maybe doing forestry or doing hill tracks or even doing ditch digging originally. These folk know the ground and they can feed back a lot to us as well and help us tweak our restoration to suit the needs of different localities. And of course, as I said, the knowledge sharing between sectors has been really useful. We've amassed a lot of information through this as well, and as project officers. So we have pulled together a technical compendium, which is kind of a brain dump from project officers about the different restoration techniques. Part of my job now is, while we're not running face-to-face events, is I'm trying to disseminate this information somehow, and hopefully this big, huge document will be chopped up into little 2-page guidance notes that we'll make available electronically, hopefully in the very near future. And so I'll leave it there just now. Obviously, we've had to react to COVID. We have not been having face-to-face events. We have done our first virtual training event, as I mentioned before, which went far better than expected. But really, there's nothing better than getting out on site, looking at features on the ground and getting a really good group of people to discuss peatland restoration. So thank you very much. I shall leave it there and look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Hi folks, so I hope you had a really good rundown of the kind of training initiatives that we're involved in, the education initiatives. So we're into the Q&A now. So a good few questions starting to come in on the feed. I'll start with actually one that I have for both Ollie and Emily probably. Actually, there seems to be some good overlaps there between your courses. Do you see opportunities for collaboration or even accreditation of your course, Emily?
Yeah, hi, I'll come in on that. Yeah, so accreditation is something we have discussed for a number of years now. I think this might be something that evolves through peatland action. At the moment, our focus is very much on trying to raise the capacity in the local contracting community across the country. We are relying on probably a small number of very large contractors, often coming up from the north of England. So we need to be raising capacity in the local community. But to do that, we need to make these courses really locally relevant. So there's a sort of difficulty there in balancing this need to tailor every course with a standardised course that you could have an accreditation for. So we're kind of working through that process, but perhaps that is to come. And it would be great to have kind of further discussions with Ollie actually on how we might go about doing that.
Ollie, do you want to?
Sure, yeah, definitely, Emily. I think your course would be perfect to go through accreditation. You could build up that experience of working on different sites and gaining an understanding of basically banking the knowledge by running your course in so many areas throughout Scotland. And then once you feel that you're at a point where you've pretty much touched on the majority of the intervention types, although having said that, obviously every site is unique. It's just that it tends to be, there are some restoration techniques that are applicable to many different sites. It's just slight adaptation or different approach, subtle different approaches. But when we went through the process of developing the accreditation for our course, we tried to think of the suite of skills that the role requires. So there is a difference there. Addressed all of that, and then there is some overlap with the location being adding sort of a challenge to running the course, because this was initially set up through the Welsh Peatland Sustainable Management Scheme. So the field trips that I mentioned in our course are specific to locations within Wales. But having gone through that process of contacting the land managers and then acquiring the GIS, the data behind it, being able to look at that in our own office and then plan a site visit for a fen, for a raised bog, and then for a blanket bog, it means that I'm now much more confident to be able to say, contact you up in Scotland, and then repeat the same process and probably follow the same structure. So I think it's just a matter of gaining a bit of experience, and then you'll also at the same time gain the confidence to apply it in different areas.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a couple more on contractors, so we'll stick with that theme for a moment. One here, I mean, I don't know what this is, so it might be that it's from Melissa Shaw. She might have to explain what it is. So have you looked at working with the supply development programme to expand your reach into contractors that haven't previously thought of contracting for Peatland works? Anybody know what the supply development programme is and be able to answer that question? No, okay. Might be worth, I don't know if I can't actually see the chat for some reason, but if Melissa wants to put something on the chat and then, or write something into the Q&A just to explain what that supply development program is, we might be able to have a look at that question. And then another one from David Smith is, have you been involved in helping contractors to build up their specialist equipment with grants, etc.? Slightly different to training, but worth dealing with.
Again, this is something we have thought about. Often it's about equipping contractors with the right buckets, kind of wide track machines. We haven't offered grants yet. I think because there was some overlap with the Scottish Rural Development Programme and the funding that was available there. So at the moment, Peatland Action is probably not in a position to be that funder, but I think that kind of idea would be very useful. I also think about machinery rings in different regions as well, to have equipment that people could borrow, but there's all sorts of issues that come with that as well. I would say though that we're actually quite lucky in Scotland in that a lot of contractors already have the kit. So they do a lot of hill track work, they do a lot of wind farm work, they do a lot of forestry work. So often it's the machinery isn't the issue, it's perhaps the skill of the driver, and it's skilling up the drivers, the actual operators is the kind of key to unlocking the potential of these machines.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move more into the education sphere now. So we had a question about, lost it. Oh yeah, at what key stage is the lack of peatland learning most apparent? Is that one for you, Richard, to have a stab at?
I think every key stage. That's the whole problem. At the moment, my daughter is busy teaching her teachers about peatlands because whenever they cover a topic in geography or similar topics, she raises the issue about peatlands, and the teacher looks kind of slightly puzzled. She's been involved in a couple of county-wide issues as well, and again, she raised the issue of peatlands. So yeah, I mean, it's very clear throughout the whole education program, right up to university level, there is very little in the way of formal material and formal processes that introduce anybody to peatlands. I think we all fell into peatlands after we left university and just happened to find ourselves in them, and it's been a case of learning on the job since.
Does anybody else want to come in on that? Ollie?
Yeah, my other half is a year 6 teacher, and it's a challenge at the best of times, dealing with the little ones. But I've looked into we've looked into training in lots of different areas and age groups over the last couple of years, and there are some really excellent opportunities to get in at each of the key stages to introduce peat, from key stage 1, up to year 9. That is about age 9. So there's habitats and there's local area is included in the curriculum. So if you're in Yorkshire, you could definitely introduce peatlands to primary school aged 9-year-old children. Then key stage 2, which is year 6, they have evolution and biodiversity within their curriculum. So there's another way there, if maybe not going into the schools, but potentially creating the lesson resources that could be sent to the teachers or could become open source, would give them the opportunity to introduce peatlands, really. I mean, it continues on. I did a talk last year at the in York to an A-level geography group, and they have carbon, water and climate change in their curriculum. So a peatland is the perfect succinct habitat to just tie all of those 4 different elements of the curriculum. So there's definitely opportunities there.
If I can just pick up a point raised by Ollie, the Irish Peatland Conservation Council, they actually run training courses for teachers about peatlands, and the course is completely oversubscribed. We don't do anything like that in Britain.
So a supplement from me on that one is who and how do we kind of take that forward? From a Yorkshire Peat Partnership perspective, most of our funding is for diggers, boots on the ground. These education programs would take a bit of thought and development. Any thoughts on how we might start to take that forward?
I'd come in on that. So at the Carbon Centre, we actually run a number of schools projects, just kind of more general environmental education projects. We do a project on our local biosphere as well, for example. And I think the key to it is aligning what we want to teach with the curriculum. The school curriculum is so tight. There's so much to it. You need to produce a package that you can hand to a teacher and say, by teaching this subject, you'll hit all these boxes here. So I think our job is to really make the link so it becomes an easy package to teach within a school setting. And I think that's particular for primary schools, but even more challenging, I would say, in secondary schools in Scotland. We do well in kind of engaging primary schools, but in secondary schools, they've got so much to teach at the moment. It is often hard kind of getting it in the door, if you like.
I mean, for example, my daughter was in geography. She was being taught all about tropical rainforest because of the carbon and everything. And she just said, well, what about peatlands? And there was a kind of embarrassed, confused silence at that point. So she then explained to the class about the importance of peatlands. That all of the training materials, they're all geared to particular standard habitats. And peatlands is always missing, even in David Attenborough films, which gets me really.
So how do we get it onto the curriculum? I mean, it's fine to offer the packs to the teachers, but they're going to take those packs on if they've got to teach a specific thing in their curriculum. Who's talking to the education departments? Anybody out there doing that? Do we know?
So we sit on a Learning for Sustainability partnership now with our local authority. So we're looking at how do we embed sort of sustainability and teachings around sustainability, bringing in themes like the biosphere, peatlands that are locally relevant into the curriculum across our local authority. And we think that'll be an effective way to do it. So there's a framework that teachers can kind of sit within and follow. It's kind of a bit more top down rather than us approaching them with this kind of off the wall project idea. Actually, it's already embedded through this partnership.
It's not a question. It's come in from a nice idea, so I'll just read this on. Actually, sphagnum farming by kids in the school garden, which I think is a lovely idea, and there's things like bog in a box and things like that that other people have done. Andrew has posted in the Q&A, look at comments in the chat on teaching. I can't actually see the chat, so if you want to put a question into the Q&A, that would help a great deal. But if somebody else can see the chat and wants to put that question forward, that'd be great. I'm going to move a little bit more on education, but more kind of overlapping with training. So there's a question on, has anyone engaged peatland restoration apprentices using the National Apprenticeship Scheme? And I'm going to get Ollie to comment on that first, because we at YPP, we've been doing a lot of work on that, and probably worth him just highlighting what we've done first and then maybe widen it out.
So again, as I mentioned, we've looked into different education training opportunities, and we've been in contact with the National Trust and the North York Moors. We're working throughout North Yorkshire, the National Park, and also the Yorkshire Dales National Park, looking at the opportunities for in the environmental sector really, and conservation, how we can bring in youngsters really, and train them up. Because that's one thing that we've always found at YPP, and Tim's struggled with over the years, is training, and development. Even if when you recruit, you can recruit, able, capable people, but getting to grips with peatlands and peatland restoration is, it's a long journey, and there's a lot of development that's needed throughout. So recently, there's been some standards developed, which is the new style of apprenticeships. And there's one that's come out recently called Countryside Ranger, which is a level 4 apprenticeship. And that's really around a lot of aspects of work that has a crossover with our peatland restoration work. It's quite generic and broad. And so I had a detailed look through how much of it was applicable and how much of it we could fit with apprentices that we were taking in, and there is great opportunity there. So I put together a proposal on that, bringing in apprentices, and it's great. It's just that it's a 3-year apprenticeship, so there's a commitment from funding. Funding as ever is the issue, bringing in enough money to support youngsters from disadvantaged backgrounds, but bringing them into the team, and improving the diversity within our team, and getting people from outside the normal applicant, the normal person who might come into YPP, broadening it out and reaching a bit further. So yeah, that's definitely an opportunity, and hopefully we can gain funding over the next year to take that forward.
I'm assuming that apprenticeship route is only available in England, is it? So Emily, do you want to come in on possibilities in Scotland? I'm sure there are other countries that we should bring in as well, but I don't have any people to ask that question of. So if anybody wants to put something in the chat or respond on that through the question Q&A, that'd be good as well. But Emily, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to know how we keep developing the training program. I think Our issue is very much a case of it's very opportunistic and it's really reacting to the needs on a kind of monthly basis almost of what we need to do in the project. We're reacting to the opportunities that come our way. I think what we need to be thinking is the long-term building capacity. And, you know, I thought of a 3-year apprenticeship scheme is fantastic, but we need the long-term resources and the ability to have the time to plan for this, to really do it effectively. We are starting to scope out how an apprenticeship scheme might work for Peatland Action. And I think we've got a strong desire that we embed kind of strong principles of peatland management and restoration throughout different sectors, throughout different organisations across the country. So I'd love to see an apprenticeship scheme where we have an apprentice in a fisheries trust, we have Scottish Water in Forestland Scotland, on an estate, on a farm, in a croft, and a community group. You know, right the way, the whole spectrum, because everybody actually working on the land, working around the land will have to start looking at peatland restoration. So we're starting to look at how we might do that, but always being very careful to disseminate the knowledge that we're amassing, because we've got loads of information now, but it's how do we get that out effectively and repeatedly and in a way that we can keep updating our best practice as well. Peatland restoration is not static. We're learning all the time. We're learning every project we do, we learn from, and it's trying to keep that knowledge up to date and current and available to all, really.
That's great. Love the idea of embedding apprenticeships everywhere we can put them. That'd be fantastic. I'll move it on a little bit. So there's a couple of questions came in about historic environment and how you're covering that in the training, the existing training courses. And I guess the follow-on question that I'd add is, if you're not, how do we do that? Yeah, I don't know who wants to pick that up.
Yeah, I can come in on that as well. So we'll actually be working in the new year with Historic Environment Scotland on this very thing. And so I would imagine it becomes an element of our training courses going forward, both externally and internally. So when we're dealing with our own project officer staff, also our ECOWs, but also when we're doing these kind of more external courses for contractors. So yes, it's something that we recognise as a gap at the moment, but we'll be working on that in the new year. Ollie,
do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, with our training course, it's a very comprehensive course. It is included in multiple units within the course. So in the delivery phase, in the unit on developing restoration plans at YPP, there's always a need to consult services and local utilities to check, you know, if there's anything that we need to avoid when we're putting recommendations forward. Also within that unit, and we touch on archaeological assessments and how we would incorporate data that comes through with maybe a brief. As an example, in a brief from a countryside stewardship, we might get polygons of features that we would need to put buffer zones around and have exclusion zones. So we go through this. There's an element of GIS as well, a little bit of mapping where we would touch on that and look at just simple techniques of applying buffers around things. So yeah, just reinforced throughout, and definitely important. Archaeology always needs thorough consideration.
Great. There's a question on costs, which Ollie, you presented some costs in your presentation, but Emily's a question for you in terms of costs of delivering the way you're delivering it, and I'd ask the supplement there is well, two supplements. One is that cost covered by Peatland Action, and then a broader question for whoever is, if people had to pay for those courses, would the demand be there? I guess that's critical for us with our Lantra course, but it might be something to bear in mind for the future. Emily, do you want to do the first part about costs for your approach?
Yeah. So Peatland Action courses are currently free. They're completely funded by Peatland Action. So they fund the Crichton Carbon Centre to deliver the courses and design the courses, and cover accommodation for our staff and cover kind of food and the venue and that sort of thing. Course costs vary depending where we are in the country, and vary depending if we've got a demonstration machine on site as well. But usually I would say they're coming in around the sort of £2,500 to £4,000 mark for a course, and on each course we can take a maximum of about 25 people, sometimes less depending on sort of site logistics. So that it's pretty cost effective actually at the moment. So we're probably spending up to about £60,000–70,000 a year delivering maybe 10 events at least. Some of them might just be kind of one-off events, but we're trying for around about 8 sort of 2-day events across the country. In terms of demand going forward, I don't think cost is a problem. People are very appreciative of the fact that it is free, and I do think we're attracting more people to the course because it's free. However, time is money when you're a contractor, so they are taking time out of their working day to come and join the course, so there's a cost associated with that for a company. But I don't think charging a fee would put that many people off. And I also think when you start to charge for something, people value that course more. So we have had problems in the past where we get on the day a no-show because it's a free course and people, you know, haven't put the money down, so suddenly something comes up and they don't attend. So I think actually having some sort of course fee might be quite useful, and will really make sure people do attend on the day.
Ollie, do you want to come in on any of that?
Yeah, demand definitely. I mean, that's why we presented it today, really, to just hear from people, to see if people want us to bring it to them and to train up the next generation. Really, that's what I see. I mean, there was some high ambition, you know, on Monday discussed in the policy session. You know, some very big targets that were discussed by the ministers and the government representatives. And you know, as Emily said, it's capacity that's the bottleneck, you know, in contractors as well as practitioners. So if we're going to achieve these ambitious goals, I do think there's knowledge sharing that needs to be done. And yeah, I mean, it would be great. It would be great to train up new restoration officers in Wales, in Scotland, in Northern Ireland. But yeah, only if the demand's there. So we'll just have to see. I do definitely think there's a case for subsidising a course like this, though. I mean, initially we developed it through Welsh Peatland's Sustainable Management Scheme, and it was fully funded, the development. The delivery was subsidised up to 80%. Now, we never actually ran the course, but that then enables anybody who's attending, you know, to maybe use some of their training budget and their CPD, develop themselves at a smaller cost if it's subsidised, and then you've got a ready workforce to go. I think, you know, it's a lengthy process developing the skills to become a competent and a competent restoration officer. So I really think we've developed a course here that exposes the learners to as much of this, or as many of the skills they need in a condensed short time scale. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we've kind of had a lot of questions on sort of practical courses and apprenticeships and things like that, and not so much on the educational resources and things. So I just wondered whether, Richard, you wanted to come in and say a few more words about what your thoughts are on training and education. I know they're struggling a little bit with the voice at the moment, so feel free to say no if you don't want to. But yeah, I mean, are there any further thoughts that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll just squeak through a more general point, actually. The devolved nations, they've all developed or are developing peatland strategies. In joined-up government, those strategies would be linking with other government departments. For example, in the England strategy, I know that DEFRA is linking quite regularly with BEIS, but linkages with Department for Education, I've not really heard that much. It does strike me that if we are going to have joined up government and we're going to have effective peatland strategies, then it will be really important for linkages to be developing, not just with departments responsible for industry and carbon reporting, but actually with education as well. And in some ways, that is going to be the most fundamental step of all, taking the entire story forward.
Great, thank you. Before I wrap up this session, I would hand over to Sarah to wrap up the conference. I'd just like to say a few words on behalf of the IUCN UK Peat Programme Steering Group and staff. First of all, thank you to all of the presenters and the Q&A for this session. I think it was really good session. I guess you may have noticed that 2020 has been a bit of an odd year, and IUCN, we really didn't know for some time whether we would be hosting a conference at all, or whether it would be face-to-face, or whether it would be online. So that meant that we had to effectively plan for 2 conferences in parallel. And as you can imagine, planning for one can be quite challenging enough as it is, but trying to second guess whether you're going to do 2 is all the more challenging. And one person who has stood up to that challenge and led the planning and organisation of both Plan A and Plan B conferences is Sarah Proctor, who is hiding away in the background there at the moment. And I'm sure you will agree that far from being a Plan B, Sarah has achieved a resounding success with our first fully online conference and set a benchmark for future conferences. The conference has run so smoothly, lots of opportunities for discussion like this, and I suspect there is, although I suspect there is a huge amount of management going on in the background that we don't see, and a lot of work going on. So I don't know how to do a round of applause online, but perhaps you could all blitz the chat with a massive thank you on all our behalf to Sarah for all of her hard work for this conference. Sarah, I believe that a suitably Welsh themed token of our appreciation of your hard work is in the post to you, so you should get that this weekend. And with that, I will hand over to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Sarah Proctor. I'm the Head of Development and Communications for the IUCN UK Peatland programme. And as Tim says, it's been a busy few days. Over the past 4 days, we've shared with you 23 sessions. We've had an inspiring and informative 73 speakers sharing their thoughts and experience with you. We've had 19 exhibitors and 560 guests. Our previously most well-attended conference last year in Belfast, we were able to welcome 211 of you. So whilst this has been a hugely different conference and a different way of welcoming delegates, we've been able to more than double our audience, which is fantastic. And a huge thank you to all of you. So whilst this has been our 10th annual conference, as Tim mentioned, it's been our first annual event, and we've learned a lot along the way with you. So thank you for bearing with us. This virtual venue has been provided by CrowdCommons, and I'd like to say on behalf of both myself and the speakers, I'd like to say a thank you to Tim, the technician, and to Chloe and Matt from CrowdCommons behind the scenes, because without yourselves, we wouldn't have had an event, and you've helped us out throughout. So thank you very much for that. The content, quite phenomenally, I think, will continue to be available on this platform for registered delegates for the next nearly 6 months. So if you've missed sessions or you want to see them again, they're available and they're there for you. The sessions will also be made available to watch on our website from the 21st of December. So for those people that weren't able to register or haven't done so yet, the sessions will be available again from there. As Tim mentioned, there's been some extremely useful discussions throughout the conference, and we've picked up various actions from our programme and for the wider partnership to take forward, and we'll share these and progress these in due course. To help in the development of these actions, we'd also like to ask for your help. So following Tuesday's session on peatland research coordination, Dr. John Walker from Swansea University collated those responses from that session, and they're now available for you to indicate your priorities for research coordination through a survey that's available on the platform menu. John will collate your responses to the survey, and what we'll do is we'll share those in our next edition of our newsletter that will be with you in January for those of you who are subscribed. For those of you not subscribed, you can do that on our website at a later date. So we'd also very much appreciate your feedback on how you found this virtual conference. As I said, it's been a new experience for us. And it will certainly help shape our next year's conference, which will be in partnership with Pennine Peat Life, so led by the North Pennines AONB, in collaboration with Yorkshire Peat Partnership and Forest of Bowland AONB, as well as Moors for the Future Partnership. It's likely to be a hybrid event, so we'll build on the successes of this virtual event, but hopefully, if the world allows, build in some in-person sessions, which, as fantastic as this event has been, I'm sure we would all agree that we've missed. We're looking forward to welcoming you back in 2021 and would love to hear from you in the meantime. Thank you very much, everyone.